Ladies and gentlemen, we are about to start our session. He sang to our souls, Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan, moderated by Mr. Ali Sethi. Ali Sethi is a writer and musician from Lahore who grew up in a family of dissenting journalists and publishers. He is a disciple of classical maestro Ustad Nasiruddin Sami of the Delhi Gharana and is himself an accomplished ghazal singer. He is currently working on a second book. He will be in conversation with Dr. Pierre, Alain, Baud and Professor Nomanul. Mr. Ali Sethi.
Thank you. This mic seems to be working. Yes. Welcome. Good morning. And thank you for joining us. I'm very pleased and honored to be on this panel about one of the greatest musicians of our times, Ustad Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan. We all know about Nusrat. We all know Nusrat. We've heard him. And yet I think you would agree that we don't really know a lot about Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan Sahab. As in, you can be associated very closely with his music, you can love it, you can hear it, you can have heard it for years and years, but somehow the sort of cultural environment in which we receive this music is usually not accompanied by scholarly work on such things, and that can create a kind of a vacuum which is helpfully filled when we have scholars in our midst who have thought about these things, who do know the tradition and the context in which miracles like Nusrat occur, and today they will illuminate the phenomenon that was Ustad Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan for us and with us. Dr. Nomanul, whom I met yesterday, and Dr. Pierre, Alain, Baud, who is here from France. Pierre, if I may, has just published this wonderful looking book, this biography of Ustad Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan, and I think this is available for purchase now, is it? Not yet. Oh no, it's an uncorrected proof, unfortunately. Yeah. You're going to have to wait for a little.
The Urdu one is available.
The Urdu version, published by Sange is available. So yes, you can buy the Urdu version. I would like to read, at Pierre's suggestion is that I should read the foreword of his book to kind of set the tone for our discussion. Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan. Even his name resonates like a poem, and the poem metamorphoses into an initiatory journey every time one sees or hears him. A spectacular man, seated cross-legged on the ground, projecting his mad song of love towards the divine, his arm outstretched, reaching for the heavens. Variously referred to as singing Buddha in Tokyo, quintessence of the human voice in Tunis, the voice of paradise in Los Angeles, the spirit of Islam in London, Pavarotti of the East in Paris, Shahenshai Qawwali in Lahore. Over the space of about 15 years, this chosen singer, one of God's madmen, one of God's sweetest, shot to planetary fame. And then he disappeared, too early, leaving 1,000 footprints behind. A man of superlatives. His weight, impressive. His octaves, 6 it is said. His albums, 125 at the beginning of the 1990s according to the Guinness Book of Records. His concerts by the thousands. His videos that can be viewed on YouTube. Google references, cassettes and CDs sold by the tens of millions. Yet a man of deep simplicity. His all-consuming mission was to spread a message. The kind and beautiful words of the Sufi poets and mystics permeated by an Islamic consciousness made of love and union. A man outside of time, snaring us in the madness of his declarations of love addressed to the divine. A man truly of his times too, open to all kinds of experiments, all kinds of fusion. He was both rooted and universal, both committed and free. In Pakistan, as all over the world, Nusrat incarnated both ancient Sufi culture, steeped in mysticism and devotion to the Sufi saints, along with the blazing modernity, which overwhelmed everything he encountered. Belonging to two worlds, he was an incredible go-between, a mythical intermediary between generations during his lifetime, a link between tradition and modernity, the East and the West, the sacred and the profane. Since his passing in 1997, his aura has continued to grow. Given the genius it evokes, this book is a very personal and modest attempt to approach the Nusratian mystery. I like that, Nusratian mystery. It is written by a European citizen who, although educated far from the subcontinent, is deeply sensitive to its 1001 fragrances, and who was overcome with emotion when he heard the gigantic yet amazingly light Nusrat during his very first concerts in France in 1985. I think I'll end there. And yes, thank you. And to begin this discussion, I would like to turn to Dr. Nomanul first. Dr. Noman has studied Islamic thought and Islamic cultures and Islamic literatures and Sufism and Sama at Harvard, and taught at the University of Pennsylvania and the Lahore University of Management Sciences, and now teaches in Karachi. And I could go on, but I won't. And Dr. Saab, if I may.
Yeah. Can you hear me? I think this is on.
It's not working. Yeah, now it's good.
Is it on now? Yes, I think it is on now. Well, let me tell you quite frankly that I'm the odd one here. Ali is an accomplished musician. I've been listening to his performances for the last year or so, and have been admiring him. Pierre, let me call you Piero, if I may. You call Piero. Piero, who is a very close friend of mine. Piero is more or less sort of consumed. He's consumed by Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan. And all of us, I think without any exception, love Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan. You know, his style, his music, his tradition, his agency as somebody who has really joined the people of the world, musical traditions and so on, into a single expression. But really, I want to say a few things about this whole tradition of Sama, and how Nusrat seems to me to embody that notion of Sama. You should remember that which makes mysticism Sufism, and I repeat, that which makes mysticism Sufism is a kind of contradiction. And I wanted to use the word tension, but the word tension is so abused now. Tension, matlo, yaar type. So I don't want to use that word. I just have begun to dislike it. I used to say tension. There is this contradiction, and the contradiction is as follows. To have divine love, to be involved in divine love, you have to be separated. A precondition of love is separation. If there is no separation between the lover and the beloved, there will be no love. If the drop joins the ocean, there is no drop. There is only the ocean. Iqbal has said, "Wasl mein mar gaya arzu, hijr mein lazzat-e talab." In union, the desire dies, and when one is separated, is this joy of desire. And so this is what it is. So this is a precondition, and yet the whole Sufi quest is to go back to the source, rejoin, to overcome that separation. And this is a problem. This is a contradiction. There has to be separation, and yet you have to work towards ending that separation. And this is very, very peculiar of Sufism. How does one resolve this? There is a contradiction. there is a paradox. And this paradox really makes poetry so important. And I would say that a characteristic feature of Sufism among world's mysticisms is the fact that music and poetry is so important. Because these issues are then resolved musically. They resolve poetically. If I look at Mantiq al-Tayr of Attar, the play on the word Simurgh. Simurgh as two words means 30 birds, as one word means a particular kind of bird. And the 30 birds they found that the Simurgh they were looking for is themselves. Now this kind of recoiling back into one's own being, recoiling back into one's own being is something very, very peculiar in Sufism. And this is the contradiction that is resolved in Qawwali singing very, very nicely. There are a number of texts written on Sama. This is the term Sama, audition. Disciples of Khaja Moinuddin Ajmeri, there is a work called Usul al-Sama, in which 3 stages of listeners is elaborated. Those who hear music, only at the moment, during the moment. The term they use is waqt. And those who hear music in a state of ecstasy called hal, so listening by hal, listening by waqt. And then thirdly, listening by haqq, by the truth. The truth itself communicates. This is the kind of thing there is. Now, I just heard the introduction by Pierre, and Pierre has said something so pertinent here. The fact that there is a kind of a very happy, a very rich, a very productive, a very fecund contradiction in Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan, that he was both free and restricted, that he was both on the ground and above the ground, that he was both local and he was universal. And this is exactly the quality. Yesterday I was talking to Ali about Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan, and the question was raised as to why Nusrat did what other people could not do. And one of the reasons is the fact that he embodies those contradictions and then resolves them poetically and musically. He resolves them musically. And that is the fundamental thing for us to understand, that Sufism is Sufism insofar as there is an inherent need for a poetic resolution of the issue. The basic issue is separation from the beloved, yet the desire to go back to the source. How does one do that? This is the thing. Now, let me go back to some concrete history and then I'll end. I think that the French have played an important role in making Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan known. Ministry of Culture, French Ministry of Culture had issued a number of recordings, and the ethnomusicologists, they have paid attention to it. And one of the musically important things for me as a layman is that Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan orients his style. Always has the ability to orient his style towards the audiences unable to understand his text. His text is not understood. And if you listen to him, let's say Dead Man Walking, the haunting songs, he is not of this land, and yet he is of this land. Let me just end by recalling an instruction, a request that the flower, the rose, makes to the drop of dew. And I think that will be very appropriate, talking in these aesthetic terms. The request that is made by the rose to the drop of dew, it says, Maninde Sahar, Sahne Gulistan mein qadam rak. Come into this garden like the dawn. Maninde Sahar, gently, quietly, Maninde Sahar, Sahne Gulistan mein qadam rak. Aaye tahepa, gohare shabnam to na toote. Aaye tahepa, gohare shabnam to na toote. If under your feet you get a drop of dew, don't crush it, don't crush the drop of the dew. Aaye tahepa, gohare shabnam to na toote. Ho koh bayaba se hama ghosh, lekin हाथों से तेरे दामने अफलाक न छूटे. हाथों से तेरे दामन अफलाक न छूटे. And this is exactly what I see in Nusrat, that Nusrat is grounded in the soil, and yet he's so universal, he's so cosmic, and this kind of compromise, this kind of dialogue, this kind of trade, this kind of traffic between the local and the temporal, and something that is transcendental, something that is universal, something that is cosmic, and that is the joy that I find in this poetry. I think I'll end there, and
thank you.
And
hello,
benefit
hello.
from others.
Yes, thank you so much, Dr. Saab. You have put your finger on the contradiction, or the sort of the tension between various, which manifests itself as the tension between, local and universal, between being grounded and rooted and seated and corporal, and being ethereal in spirit, and being all presence. As a myself, I'm very interested in how musicians achieve states of transcendence, both musically and then eventually culturally, how they become icons and come to represent things much larger than themselves. And just before I ask Pierre about Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan's personality, because we are lucky to have someone here who has known Khan Sahab, Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan, for many years and has spent a lot of time with him. So I'll tell you what I know about him, what has come to me through myth and sort of, the common culture. And also through some sort of musicians talk, the way musicians talk about other musicians. I know that Madam Noor Jahan, who was a great singer of Pakistan, collaborated with Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan Sahab once. They did a duet for a song together, and Khan Sahab also composed some songs for her. And she said she was watching him do a composition one day, and she said to one of her companions in Punjabi, I'll say, she said, "Inna da zehen bahut acha hai." That the way he thinks about music, he has a kind of, he's brilliant. The way he conceives of music is brilliant. He's a brilliant conceiver of music. I talked to a Qawwal who knew him and who once said to me, he said, the thing about him was, and this comes back to the element of the contradiction or the tension, he said, unki awaaz mein bass nahi tha. That there was not, he didn't have a baritone voice. And his voice only became interesting as it began to rise, as it began to go into the higher octaves. And of course, what has become so iconic about Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan is that scream, is that like the kind of like ecstatic scream, almost the rupture. You can hear something exploding and something rasping at the top. And what classical musicians might dismiss usually as an impure, or as a violation of what the voice should be like at the higher octaves. It should be very correct and Nusrat exploded that. He went past that completely. Now, of course, in Qawwali, we know that you are expected to sing from the higher notes, because at some level you are embodying the soul that desires union. And so, जब तक आप उसको हारमोनियम पे हम कहते हैं कि तीसरे या चौथे काले सुर से शुरू किया जाए. That if you are usually singing from, say, this note, then you start the Qawwali 3 notes higher, because we want to hear you being the birahini, being the woman who yearns, and so you take it to the higher states. What kind of personal context was Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan coming from? His father, we know, was a very famous Qawwal. He came from a family of Punjabi, Pathan, eventually Punjabi Qawwal, settled in Faisalabad. One of the people I know who knew Khan Sahab said to me, all his great music was a revenge against his childhood. So I said, what do you mean about that? Is it because his father used to, and I don't know if this is true, you will have to corroborate it for us, that his father used to say that Nusrat, because his voice is not conventional, should focus on tal and not on singing. इनको ताल में लगाया जाए, कि तबले की practice करें ये. And of course, eventually his tal and his gimmicks with the beat cycle became his great signature. That gave the greatest pleasure when you listen to Nusrat, is the way he frustrates and then catches the beat and then frustrates it again and then catches it, and the sargam patterns that he would do, so he kind of, like all great artists in fact, was using what might be perceived as weaknesses or as flaws and turning them into his great singular strengths. Is there any truth in this?
Well, a lot of truth. a lot of truth. And actually, what was amazing with Nusrat, what is amazing with Nusrat was his versatility and was his capacity to go from a very high pitch scream to a whisper, and the whisper was even more sensitive and more touching than the. But I would say the essence of a being resides in his mystery. I just quote this saying of Albert Camus' daughter reacting to the biographies of his father, of her father. And definitely, I may have got a number of opportunities to be with Nusrat in Pakistan or worldwide, organizing his shows. But definitely, I'm not sure to know him better than everyone of us here as one's own Nusrat. Like these books, these lines are very much a particular approach of my Nusrat. Afterwards, it may sound within each experience of a scholar, of a musician, but that it's quite a personal experience. Back to Nusrat's background. Yes, indeed, his father didn't want him at all at the beginning to be a kawal. He wanted him to have. He was foreseeing a future of a doctor or engineer, and it's actually much late. He was some years before he died. Fateh Ali died. That he realized the capacities, the talent, the born talent of his son. And because he just surprised him, just starting doing his tal indeed. The first self-training Nusrat gave to himself was by playing tabla. Actually, at that time, Fateh and Mubarak's families were a hub of so many talented classical musicians, semi-classical musicians, a lot coming from India, and his family in Faisalabad, Lialpur at that time, was very much a center point where so many people were coming from all over India. At that time, the partition happened, but the border, very well, it was not so strict that now. And then he from his childhood, where he has been listening so much, and then in the book I qualify him of a mystical and musical sponge. He has this incredible capacity to just collect, grasp both the tal and the sargams and the melody, the rag, and afterwards, according the audience, according the place, to render it in a very in a way, in a very touching way, the way the audience would be able to get it. For instance, in an urs in Pakistan, he was able to develop extensive stanzas of poetry. Sometimes it was I don't know, it was an hour long. Well, certainly a number of you have got the chance to listen to him. And in a foreign context, he was much more working on the sargams, on the beat, on the rhythm, on educated high middle class persons or educated family or settings. He was developing the rag, and he was definitely experiencing with a number of second generation South Asian, second generation, third generation in the West, South Asians, and that was his versatility, which was quite.
This all sounds exactly right. I mean, I think it corresponds to what you're describing. It corresponds to the definition of a genius. What is a genius? This is scholars and intellectuals have argued about this for decades, if not centuries. I find that it's not the one who is most precise. It is not the one who is most learned. It is not the one who is most accurate. The genius is, and the artist as genius is he or she मुझे किसी ने कहा जिनको महफिल लूटना आता हो, you know, the ability to become, to completely to inhabit the moment, any given moment, you know, you change the context, you change the setting. So if Khan Sahib Nusrat is performing in say Faisalabad, he will make an assessment, an intuitive assessment of the audience, of the mahal, of the mood, and fill it to its capacity, you know. And if he's in Paris, he will make an assessment. And that assessment, it may not be a calculation, you know, it is not something that you sort of work out on. It's intuitive, it comes naturally to such people, you know, this ability to figure out कि इस वक्त इतनी गुंजाइश है, इस गुंजाइश में यहाँ ऐसे होगा strike तो ये, you know, this is ये लूटा जाएगा. And this is what he always managed to do. He always managed to do this. And I even feel that as a musician, when I listen to him singing, you know, compare him to someone like Mehdi Hasan Khan, who's a great singer, and similarly, you know, a genius again. Mehdi Hasan Khan Saab had this extraordinary quality which he worked on for many years and developed, which was that the lower notes were very rich, and the higher notes were equally rich. Like there was a mellifluousness.
Yes,
you know,
yes.
the voice traveled very smoothly up to down, and you never felt that there was a separation between the lower voice and the higher voice. It was smooth and rich and sweet everywhere it went, you know, and that was his greatness. And I suppose the ghazal as a form required that also, because it had that. With Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan Sahib, the lower voice is almost absent, you know, like when he's singing, oh, like it's almost like this. It's almost like a hoarse whisper at the lower notes. And in fact, there's a possibly apocryphal story that I can't resist, I have to share with you. Somebody once told me that when Madam Noorjahan and Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan were rehearsing for this duet, she, who was a genius in her own way, she heard it and she said, "Inko lower notes pe rakhe, main upar notes pe aungi." So she configured the scale and manipulated the music director to make sure that he would always remain at the lower notes and she would sit on top in this very comfortable place, because, you know, she didn't want him to go into the higher notes where he would take over completely. So this again, his voice kind of embodies that contradiction again. There's a sense of this very, you know, sparse and almost unempathetic voice at the lower notes. And you know, the song is you know, in the lower notes, he almost is saying the words at the lower notes. You know, he almost says them. It's almost like he's like Lou Reed or somebody, like the way he sings the notes at the lower octaves. They're flat. They're delivered in these flat, almost you know, didactic and
then when he goes into the higher note, it's such a contrast from what you hear at the lower note. You know, the way he arrives and achieves at this place, which usually is not where male singers, certainly classically trained male singers usually. So he's for lack of a better word, his music is freakish. You know, there's this kind of wonderful freakish quality.
Yes.
It is so, you use the word mad in this, you know, and I would say mad in the sense of divana, you know, like in the way that we think of mad in the divine, ecstatic, like out of control, and also singular sense. There's something completely singular about Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan Sahib. And this is one of the reasons that he was so universally loved, was because there was nothing like him.
Yes.
You know, there was nothing like him, and he embraced his anokhapan completely.
Yes.
And in his music, he became that thing.
Yes, I think that you know, he almost turned high notes into an independent mode of performance.
Yes.
You know, sometimes totally ignoring the lower side and remaining through and through on the higher side, and somehow it was very, very appealing. You know, nobody would have imagined that Qawwali singing would take on this global character that it did through him. And one of the things is that, as you rightly recognize, that he was able to adjust himself, to tune himself to the audience. And I remember, let me recall an incident when I was in Harvard. This was in the late 80s. When Sayyida Abada Hussain was the ambassador and her daughters were students at Harvard. There was a concert in the largest auditorium, the largest theater
Sanders Theatre, which has a huge capacity at Harvard, and he began singing. And of course, he was singing words that the audience could not catch. He began with Persian. He began with Khusro. Now, all of a sudden, the fire alarm went. The fire alarm went, and of course, when the fire alarm goes, the fire marshal is the king. If he says stop, we have to stop. So the fire marshal came and he said, "Gentlemen, ladies, over, you have to get out." The whole crowd, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people went out because there was some fire alarm. And it was raining, and believe me, it took something like 1 hour for them to fix the problem. Not one member of the audience left. They were soaked in rain. It was raining outside, heavy, and every single one was there. When we came back, all the seats were full again. This is the magic of Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan, and the choice of poetry and the ability to combine those things which look rather dissimilar. So combining, let us say, Iqbal with Bhulle Shah, and Bhulle Shah with Waris Shah, and Waris Shah with Khusro, and Khusro with Ghalib, and then interposing one between the other. This is quite a remarkable talent. Yeah. So I think that this ability to modulate oneself according to the audience, as you say, is a performative quality, is a performative virtue that he had, and somebody who really made a virtue out of, I don't know, musically it was a disqualification or a disability, I don't know. The lower notes were almost not there, but the high notes, I mean, like, Rahat Fateh Ali Khan, high notes, through and through. Sometimes too much of it, but you see that almost shrieking, and that shrieking becomes musically respectable.
And that shrieking actually is, I mean, its cultural impact. It's been phenomenal. It's been huge. It has redefined singing in certainly in the northern part of our subcontinent. I mean, I was saying this to Dr. Saab yesterday. We were talking, and I was saying, one of the things that strikes me and that people really talk about is how Qawwali is now Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan. I mean, if you look at it as late as the 1970s, you see a film like Amar Akbar Antony, in which the Qawwali is a joke. It's like a routine in which people are clapping with broken glasses and pan stains on their mouths, and they're wearing these topis, and they're saying Tayyab Ali Pyar Ka Dushman Hai, and it's a kind of Delhi caricature, in the popular imagination of certainly Bollywood, even in Pakistani TV comedy routines, the Qawwali was it's a sort of, the Qawwal takes himself too seriously, he's a figure of fun, he's often, kind of broken sounding and all of that. And what Nusrat Khan Sahab is able to do is that he is so dynamic and so present that he kind of, his way of doing the Qawwali, which is a very particular Faisalabadi. I mean, I have Urdu-speaking friends who say to me, "Ye bhi koi Qawwali hai," like they have that sort of, there's an element of snobbery often that you will encounter. That Qawwali is a Dehlvi thing, and it is a thing associated with the Dargah of Hazrat Nizamuddin Auliya, and please let it be that way. Let's not let Punjabi people start using their thick Punjabi accents to pronounce our extremely delicate, beautiful words and that sort of thing. But we can't help it. Nusrat has taken over the Qawwali as a form. And to the extent that no Bollywood blockbuster is now complete without somebody in jeans and a t-shirt going on about Mera Ishq Sufiana, without even knowing what that means. I think that can be attributed to Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan Sahab completely. I mean, I really think that is his contribution. How did this happen? How did he take over this genre and then completely come to define, South Asian devotional singing?
Well, actually, here it was a quite long process. That reminds me, I just recently read a book by Varun Swami, a scholar from South Asian origin. The title is a parallel between the lives of Baud and Nusrat as pop prophets. How both of them were quite rooted in their own both musical and religious or spiritual tradition.
Nusrat and who else?
Bob Marley. And it's very interesting parallel, sometimes perpendicular, but quite parallel. Both of them were extremely well rooted in their own been partly rooted in the musical style of these faiths. Both of them have the rituals, and both of them have been using the medias, not forcefully by their will, but it happened that all the people around them were just pushing and promoting them, the things. Both of them were not themselves considering at all as prophet. Well, both of them were quite humble, quite lay person, just carriers. They were messengers, messengers of a faith, messengers of a message. And also both of them were in this modern world carriers of the commodification of the art. And definitely if unfortunately Nusrat left us too early, it's also because he's here the really informal rhythm of tuning I remember the French Punjabi friend told me once, Nusrat is an angel. He has been sent by the Almighty to convey a message to the world. He conveyed it in a very beautiful way, and afterwards he took it off. Well, it's a way to consider it. But as to his incredible capacity to tune with the audience. I remember once we were in Brazil, and I had two concerts over there. The first one was in a very pushy Western classical music festival, where most of the audience were quite white-looking, white Brazilian from a very high standard, quite a bit out of their own roots. The second one was in a very popular theatre in São Paulo. And it happened that with Nusrat, every time we were reaching a place, wherever it be, whether in Pakistan or in Pakistan, it didn't need much, but in the west, in the south, he was tuning up, he was switching on the radio or the television. And listening whatever jingle, whatever advertisement, publicity, whatever, or MTV, Brazil, MTV, Tunisia, and I think, Ustadji, it's not always the best quality. He said, never mind. And afterwards, he was able, he was listening then, he was deconstructing the rhythm, deconstructing the rag, or the music. And afterwards, in the evening or the following day, he was able to render into his classical kawali some flavors of that. And in Brazil, it happened that the first day that didn't function because people were not into these rumba and samba things. The second day, it was overwhelming because that was...
I hear you, and I would like to draw, before we open it up for questions, I want to put one question to the panelists. One of the things that Nusrat Fateh Khan Sahab did, among many others as we have discussed, is that musically, he emphasized what we call the sargam. Sargam is Sare Gama, it's an abbreviation of just Sare Gama, se laf se sargam nikla. And you will recognize it, in the famous song, I think it's... the Maskalandar, or one of the others in those kafis, that kafi scale where he has that so he does the alphabet of the music, the alphabet of the rag, the Sare Gama Padha Nisa, which is the alphabet on which the rag is structured. He is always drawing your attention to what lies behind the exterior, the overt. And I've seen interviews of his where, the wonderful long interview that he did for Lok Virsa, for the PTV program Lok Virsa in the 80s. If you haven't seen it, you must see it. It's very, very interesting, and he's in a great candid mood, and he's speaking very kind of beautifully about his journey as a musician. He was a proud musician. He was indeed very humble, and he was cosmopolitan. And he was a genius, and he was able to work with everybody from Peter Gabriel to A.R. Rahman to Madame Noor Jahan, a very diverse range of audiences and situations. But he was a man who ultimately was the product of what we refer to as a mahal.
There was an environment which produced him. And it was, as you say, the Mubarak Ali Fateh Ali clan, which is the clan that he came from, of Kawals in Faisalabad, formerly Lalpur, was at that particular moment in time full of a very sort of rich musical conversation. So my question to you is, sure, a genius is made, we say he's an angel sent by God and all of that, and that of course may be true. But it's also true that, societies produce artists, and cultures produce musicians, and countries also have to take responsibility and take pride eventually in what they produce. I'm sure there will be no Nusrat, just as I'm sure there will be no Bob Marley and there will be no Mehdi Hassan. You cannot repeat a phenomenon which is a phenomenon. You can't repeat it. And if you repeat it, it's boring, it's not interesting. So you can imitate, but that's not interesting. But in order to continue to have great musicians, I believe, as a practicing and studying musician myself, I believe that we need more than just individual focus and concentration. We need cultures of music. What can we do you think, to nourish the kind of culture out of which Nusrat arose? Can we recover that kind of culture? Can we pass on that kind of, those conditions, those creative conditions to young people in a place like Pakistan today? If yes, how? What should we do? Let me in this connection respond to something you commented upon, namely that his pronunciation was not proper. Yeah? So the complaint goes, the way Sabri brothers will pronounce their hafs and their has and all that. He didn't do that. But I think that he did a great service. He did a great service by cracking the elitism that was there and bringing it from the high horse down to earth. And this is a great contribution of Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan. Not only that, but he even made folk songs popular. I know those who even find it distasteful to speak in Urdu, because they would only speak in English. I have heard people in the 80s in Harvard jumping around, So I think that this kind of cracking through the elitism, and not cracking through the elitism through some kind of a mad rebellion, but through full art. See, it was his art that he developed in a particular direction, and it overwhelmed this issue. So you're right. I think that we're about to wrap up, so we're going to have to open it up, I think, to the audience. Okay, I have said what I'm sorry, I've just got a signal. So, are there any questions in the audience? Would anybody like to say something or ask something of our distinguished panelists, please? Nothing. Okay.
Something just possibly to raise question. I just want to quote Wasifuddin Dagar from the Dagar Valley, who was kind enough to write a blog for the. For me, that what he says about music, Indian music, South Asian music, and Nusrat is quite true. And I just want to, yes, Indian South Asian classical music stands on 7 seen and 7 unseen modes. Nusrat was pure in front of the stage, something that people have seen and seen at the back of it. The great musician took the world by storm. He gave a new dimension to the century-old Qawwali that we know. I would say what's very important to with Nusrat is that what Wasif told me once, the artist's truth is not only on stage but also backstage. And there was a consistency in the whole Nusrat's character, personality, and being, that he was both a messenger of the Sufi messages, both on stage and backstage in his daily relation with the people, and it's
yeah. Wonderful. So he sang to our souls, and we love him very much, and we're very grateful.
The 7 seen and the 7 unseen notes. That's beautiful.
I just want to say, I think we should have. It would be wonderful if there could be more institutionalized study of music in our country. I don't mean it has to be a bureaucratic enterprise. I don't mean the government has to ensure it happens. I don't mean that it has to be purely classical music or one way or another. But I just mean that the sustained study of music as a vocational, as a legitimate vocation, as something that people can undertake and can do consistently for long periods of time, is what gives us this kind of ecstasy and this kind of perfection. And I think if we all should, try in our ways to encourage that and make that happen. That's my 2 cents. Thank you very much. Would you like to say something?
I don't know. Are we over?
I think we are over. Yes. We have 5 minutes. Fantastic.
Well, I mean, the question you had raised, I think, is a very important question. What do we do to nourish this? I think that it is really very, very important, and not to let the classical tradition disappear. We have got to pay tribute to it. It is very important. Nusrat was classically sensitive, classically trained. So are you. You are into classical music, and I think that in the current environment of music being just entertainment and not art, it's a very difficult undertaking. And what is deeply important is this notion of immersion. You have to immerse. And if you have quick stuff, you have beats that come and go, there's no immersion. And immersion is something fundamental in Sufi practices. This notion of istighraq, this notion of contemplation. Contemplation is so important, and music leads you to that contemplation, and that comes only through that sustained exposure to classical music. So I think it is really important, and I'm very happy. I hope I don't embarrass you, Ali, but I don't. Young people like you, classically oriented. At least you look towards the classics. You would speak about Mehdi Hasan Khan Sahab and his notes and his tremendous quality of the notes and sub-notes and surtiya and all that. We have got to have a sense of that. This running quick stuff that we see in the movie industry, that we see in music, really will damage it. We have to have sustained immersion into the musical experience.
I agree.
What the Sufis will call istighraq, what would we call muraqaba, what would be called getting deep into contemplation. That is really very important.
In fact, a wonderful thing you're saying. I completely agree with you. Classical music में जब आपकी तालीम होती है तो आप बंदिश सिखाई जाती है, राग में आपको बंदिश सिखाई जाती है. बंदिश is a composition, और उसमें you have 2 parts usually to a bandish. You have the asthai and the antara. The asthai is the chorus and the antara is the verse. तो अस्थाई अंतरा ये जो पंजाब में कह के वो अस्थाई अंतरा हो गया, अस्थाई अंतरा. तो मेरे उस्ताद नसीरुद्दीन सामी साहब जो कराची में रहते हैं, and who is comes from the distinguished family of the Delhi Gharana, and they trace their lineage all the way back to Hazrat Amir Khusro. He said to me one day, he said, बेटा अस्थाई है, अस्थाई कहो. मैंने कहा जी अस्थाई. हाँ, अस्थाई नहीं है, अस्थाई है. और अस्थाई का भी जो लफ्ज़ है, ये पता है किस लफ्ज़ से निकला है? मैंने कहा जी जान मुझे नहीं पता, आप बताइएगा. He said इस्तेहकाम से निकला है. So I don't know if we can prove that is I'm sure there are multiple versions of where these things come from. There's great raging debate, especially between India and Pakistan, always making claims about ये हमने दिया है, ये हमने दिया. मगर what Dr. Nomanul is saying about Tehrao and about istikam and about immersion and about sustained surrender to something that is beautiful and superior to you, and that will fill you up with itself, as opposed to a transactional attitude to it, which is, I'm here for 20 minutes, मुझे 20 मिनट में 20 रुपए का चाहिए, which is what the culture encourages, here and everywhere else. And unfortunately, the internet is a monster as far as this is concerned, because it encourages you to truncate your attention span. I mean, it's just terrible. And one sounds like a reactionary, like a terrible conservative when one is saying this. But I really feel that we have to recover and rescue these apparently ancient modes of living and being. And we have to save ourselves in order to do this. Now, but there is a question in the audience. Would you like a microphone? Can we have a mic here, please? Yes, it's coming. Please introduce yourself. before you ask.
Oh, thank you. All right. My name is Wasim.
No, my question is, I've been contemplating about the truly divine voice of Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan, and I wonder if it also incorporates a sense of ambiguity, in the sense that he is a male singing with a female voice in the higher notes. And I've been thinking about, for instance, Abda Parveen and Masuma Anwar, also two extraordinary voices. Male voices or masculine voices.
Yeah, please take that microphone away.
I didn't get.
Can we just switch off that terrible thing? People are jumping to the audience.
Okay. Should I try to repeat my...
Yes, so questions about ambiguity. You're saying that there's a little ambiguity in his in a female. Abda Parveen and Masuma Anwar, who are women singers, supposedly keep almost male voices.
Yes. Hey.
Just remind you that that Persian has no genders, so you don't know if it is a woman or a man. And when you see a woman like Abda Parveen singing as a male, nobody worries about it. मैं न था, यार था, दिलदार था, मैं थी, फजा थी, मैं न था. She says मैं न था. It's a woman saying मैं न था. Does not bother at all. It is completely natural. Similarly, when a man sings like a woman, Birha, ki dastan, मैं जाना. So this is quite deeply rooted within the tradition. That there's not distinguished between the genders. And I think that you have raised a very important point that through the voices, right? Through the voices, Abda Parveen can be very male-like. But even in the verse that they sing, there is no distinction. In Farsi, there is no distinction. So you never know.
Then again, they were both angels. Well, Abidadidi is the being both gender, both sexes. I think it's a beautiful compliment.
How lucky and blessed we are to be, and this is just occurring to me right now, how lucky and blessed we are to belong to such a rich
Tradition. And how ironic is our ignorance? You know, the source and the...
It is not ironic, it is disastrous.
Thank
Thank you for having this session. This has been one step towards remedying any... Thank you very much.
Just for the Urdu readers, I will sign my book in Urdu because it's the only one available here. The English one will be launched by next month, apparently. It's an approved version, but you can go through it. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Pierre.